Every NFL team was pathetic in one way or another in 2024. The Browns were bad on offense. The Panthers were bad on defense. The Bengals were bad at letting me in the stadium despite the fact that I'm a nuisance to society. Even though this video is being posted about 4 months too late, I wanted to see just how pathetic every NFL team was in 2024. Through meticulous research and as a massive fan of comparative stats that put pathetic teams in perspective, I wanted to come up with one pathetic stat for every NFL team. And that I did. What is every NFL team's pathetic stat from 2024? The Buffalo Bills' pathetic stat. The player with the longest reception for the Bills in 2024, Tyrell Shavers, has exactly one target in his entire career. I promise we'll get to some really good ones later, but for now, we're gonna have to start with a team that was really good, so finding a pathetic stat was kind of hard to come by. Josh Allen at times really had to carry this offense by himself. He didn't really have an elite wide receiver around him, as his longest pass of the year was a 64-yard bomb to Keon Coleman against the Lions. 2 weeks later, against the Jets, the Bills are blowing out the Jets so badly that he was subbed out for Mitch Trubisky, who threw one pass. That pass was a little check down to Tyrell Shavers, who took it 69.
Nice.
Thank you. Yards to the house. To date, it is his only catch and target of his NFL career. The Miami Dolphins' pathetic stat. The Dolphins had the same amount of wins against teams with a winning record in the regular season as they did in the preseason. Now we're getting to some of the good stuff. Because all season long, the Dolphins tried to break that can we beat good teams narrative, and we've got a high-flying offense, and I'm Mike McDaniel. And the only things I've ever lifted in a weight room are my players' spirits. High five! Mike McDaniel has two redeeming qualities. He's endearing, and his childhood friend is incredible at stand-up. But it is true that the Dolphins only beat one winning team in the entire season, and it was in Week 10 against the Rams. And that goes along with the fact that they only had one win against a winning team in the preseason as well. It was against Washington, which imagine saying Washington was a winning team pre-Jaden Daniels. Matter of fact, their only other win against a team that wasn't in last place was against the Jets at home in overtime. The New England Patriots' pathetic stat. In 2024, there were more wide receivers with 3 touchdowns in one game than there were Patriots receivers with 3 touchdowns all season. The Patriots couldn't get anything going on offense in 2024. They had a weak passing game and a horrible O-line. As a matter of fact, they only had 3 wide receivers who had 3 touchdowns total. By contrast, 4 receivers in the NFL this year, Jawan Jennings, Jordan Addison, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, all had 3 touchdowns in one game. However, the Patriots should ramp it up in 2025. They have an anchor on the O-line in Will Campbell, they have an ascending Drake May, they have a Stephon Diggs as wide receiver 1, and if Jalen Polk can get his head out of his ass, they'll have a much stronger receiver core all around. The New York Jets' pathetic stat. 9 NFL teams had fewer losses overall than the Jets had fourth quarter collapses. They also had more fourth quarter collapses than wins. 2 years ago, former Jets GM Joe Douglas found the one way to get all of America to not feel bad for the Jets when they lose, and that was for them to sign Aaron Rodgers. They astounded all of us in 2024 when they blew 6 fourth quarter leads. Let's go through them. In Week 4, they lost to a Broncos team who didn't score until there was 3:08 left in the third. In Week 8, they gave up a rushing touchdown on 4th and goal at the 1 with 22 seconds left. In Week 11, they allowed 2 fourth quarter touchdowns to Anthony Richardson, which feels like sacrilege. In Week 13, they gave up a 92-yard pick 6 to their former 6th overall pick. Yes, he is a defensive lineman. Thank you for asking. In Week 14, they lost to a Dolphins game in overtime in the only 300-plus yard game Aaron Rodgers had all year. And in Week 16, they lost 19-9 to a Rams team who didn't even have a lead until the fourth quarter. 9 teams had fewer losses than that all season. And to think, if the Jets had won all those games, they would have been in prime position to lose in the wildcard round. Moving along to the AFC North. The Baltimore Ravens' pathetic stat. All 5 of Justin Tucker's missed field goals from 50 yards or longer came in each of the Ravens' 5 losses. There wasn't much to dislike about the 2024 Baltimore Ravens. The one exception, both on and off the field, was Justin Tucker. He had a career-low field goal percentage of 73.3%, which is the first time in his NFL career that he's had a field goal percentage below 82%. He specialized in kicking from long distance, but 2024 was a major weak point for that. He lost a lot of what made him special, possibly and probably because his off-the-field problems finally came to the forefront. And it cost the Ravens a few victories in 2024, one of which was against Cleveland. He's now gone from Baltimore, and I assume he will now spend his free time perusing the casual encounter section of Craigslist.
You know that's not a thing anymore, right?
It's not? Well, you, let me have this. And though that might have cost him home field advantage in the playoffs and a number 1 seed, they did technically have a bye in the wild card round. The Cincinnati Bengals' pathetic stat, Trey Hendrickson had only 1 fewer sack than the rest of the Bengals defense combined. Is it pathetic because the Bengals still won't pay Trey Hendrickson? Big time.
He signed the contract!
Oh, shut up and go brush your teeth, you Batavia-ass motherfucker. He played well above the value of his contract to the point that he led the NFL in sacks. He should be happy? Bitch, you should be happy. Much of his production and the lack of production elsewhere was possibly due to Lou Anarumo continuing to try to make your mom's favorite player a thing. However, with a new defensive coordinator who really wants to focus on rushing the passer, a guy on the opposite end who's kinda good at that, and a first-round pick who has me drinking all of the Kool-Aid, it could be way better next season. Bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat. Through the first 3 weeks of the season, the Bengals allowed exactly as many receiving touchdowns to offensive linemen as 3 teams allowed to tight ends all year. That just sucks. That just sucks. The Cleveland Browns' pathetic stat. The Browns' passing offense threw as many interceptions in Week 15 as their passing defense had all season. The Browns were pathetic all season, and their quarterbacks continue to be the sandwiches they've always been. In their Week 15 home matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, Jameis Winston and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Peterman, Hackenberg, Whedon combined for 0 touchdowns and 4 interceptions en route to a 21-7 loss. Their secondary was no better all season, and if you don't believe me, Carson Wentz in that game threw 2 passes, neither of which were picked off. Is that even possible? The Browns picked off a mere 4 passes all season, and you'd think they'd be better if they didn't have to practice against their own quarterbacks. Bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat. The Browns converted both the fewest extra points and the fewest field goals of any team in the NFL. The Pittsburgh Steelers' pathetic stat? Since 2021, when seasons expanded to 17 games, among teams who have made the playoffs, the Steelers have 3 of the 5 lowest season-long touchdown totals. Mike Tomlin's the name, and sneaking into the playoffs is the game. They've made the playoffs and snuck into the playoffs at that 3 out of the last 4 seasons. And this year, they're probably going to do so again against, New England. They're the NFL's epitome of just good enough, and this stat is a mere continuation of that.
You're just jealous of Steeler football. We have 6 rings, and we have t-shirts that say 6 Super Bowl rings, because we know we ain't going to be able to print no more anytime soon, Permanente Bros.
You. To the AFC South. The Houston Texans' pathetic stat. In Week 17, the Texans became only the 2nd team since 1994 to score exactly 2 points in a game. The Texans are a pretty good team in 2024, and there's no reason they can't continue that into 2025. They have one of the better quarterback wide receiver duos in the NFL, and they were able to put aside their differences to be one of the better tandems in the league. Week 17, however, was quite different. The Texans squared off against the Ravens in NRG Stadium and put up a pathetic performance. Based on the Texans' performance, the NRG they used must have been the coal that Santa put in their stocking. Houston's only points of the game came when Derrick Henry was tackled in his own end zone by Kamari Lassiter. The Indianapolis Colts' pathetic stat. Anthony Richardson had the lowest completion percentage in the NFL among quarterbacks with at least 10 starts. No other quarterback who fits this category had a completion percentage below 60%. Anthony Richardson is the Mel Kiper of quarterbacks. Intimidating, but also often woefully inaccurate. They brought in Daniel Jones to compete with Richardson in 2025. If you combine Jones's and Richardson's touchdown totals from 2024, it would equal Russell Wilson's. Anthony Richardson has pretty much had to learn the job of quarterback while with the Colts, and the results have been less than stellar. And even he will admit that the job gets tiring every now and then. His accuracy was heavily criticized when he came into the NFL, and so far he's proved the doubters right. If he can't beat Daniel Jones in minicamp, his days might be numbered. The Jacksonville Jaguars' pathetic stat: after forcing just 9 turnovers in 2024, the Jags now account for half of all the seasons in NFL history where a team has finished with fewer than 10 takeaways. The Jags defense struggled mightily in 2024. Not only did they have the most passing yards allowed in the NFL, but they also had the fewest takeaways. There have only been 4 seasons in NFL history where a team finished with fewer than 10 takeaways, and the Jags, after last year, now have half of them. I'm sure this is going to get better now that Travis Hunter's in their secondary, but they really badly need to get their together. Bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat. Gabe Davis had more touchdowns in the second half of the 2022 AFC divisional round than he had in all of 2024. Mind you, he got paid more than Saquon Barkley. The Tennessee Titans' pathetic stat: in 12 starts, Will Levis had twice as many interceptions returned for a touchdown as he had wins. Everyone likes to make fun of Will Levis for putting mayo in his coffee, even though mayo is the closest thing Kentucky has to coffee creamer. Make fun of him for his turnover-prone ways instead. He embarrassed the out of himself on numerous occasions. He had 4 pick sixes in 2024, which led the NFL. Week 1 against the Bears, Week 3 against the Packers, Week 12 against the Texans, and Week 15 against... Not only did he have 4 pick sixes in 2024, he had an awful 2 wins. One of those wins was in a game where he threw a pick 6 because there was bound to be some overlap somehow. Bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat. Sam Hubbard had more touchdown receptions in Nissan Stadium than Tyler Boyd had for the Titans all season. Mind you, it was the last play of Sam Hubbard's career. Moving to the AFC West, the Denver Broncos' pathetic stat: in Week 13, the Broncos became the only team in the NFL to allow 30 points to the Browns, while allowing Jerry Jeudy to set the NFL record for most yards in a game against his former team. The Broncos had a strong defense all season long. However, in Week 13, they committed football's cardinal sin.
They lightly touched Patrick Mahomes?
Not that one. They made the Cleveland Browns look exciting. It was a back and forth 41-32 affair where Jameis Winston had 497 passing yards and Jerry Jeudy had 235 receiving yards, which is the most yards ever in one game against someone's former team, which broke the record previously set by T.O. Though Denver ultimately came away with the victory, and though their defense finally showed up in the last moment of the game, you should never make Cleveland look exciting. Ever. The Kansas City Chiefs' pathetic stat: the Chiefs, who had 15 wins, had a mere plus 52 point differential in 2024. It's the second lowest point differential in the Super Bowl era among teams with at least 13 wins. I realize one game was the icing on the cake for this stat, but I do not care. The Chiefs did win close games. They were 11-0 in games decided by one possession. However, their status of winning close games time after time again made it difficult to believe that they weren't frauds. The only team in this category to have a worse point differential, the 2022 Vikings. They had 13 wins and a -3 point differential. The next worst point differential among teams with at least 15 wins, the 2004 Steelers. It was plus 121. The Las Vegas Raiders' pathetic stat: in 2024, 4 different quarterbacks had more total passing yards in one game than the Raiders' leading rusher, Alexander Mattison, had in total rushing yards all year. The Raiders drafted Ashton Jeanty, so now they don't have to convince everyone that everyone's favorite RB2 from 3 years ago can still be a thing. Instead, they're going to force-feed Jeanty so he dies of exhaustion by week, 6. The Raiders had the fewest rushing yards in the NFL in 2024 with 1,357, which is 204 yards fewer than any other team in the NFL. They tried to convince the world that Alexander Mattison, Sincere McCormick, and 2023 fantasy football daddy for 2 weeks, Samir White, could be a thing, and they weren't. Mattison was the leader of the pack, which isn't saying much. The 4 quarterbacks who had more passing yards than Madison's season-long total in one game, you ask? They are Kirk Cousins, Jameis Winston, Jared Goff, and your daddy. The Los Angeles Chargers' pathetic stat. Every game in which Jalen Reagor had at least one carry resulted in him having a negative rushing yardage total. There wasn't a lot to dislike about the Chargers in 2024. However, wherever Jalen Reagor exists, there will always be sadness. I know Jim Harbaugh likes running the football and he's quite good at it, but even he can't make Jalen Reagor a thing. Reagor has continued to be a disappointment in his NFL career, as in 2024, he had 7 catches for 100 yards and no scores. As a runner, he was even worse. He had 3 carries, only one of which was for positive yardage, and it was for 1 yard. The Chargers as a whole, not too bad otherwise. Moving to the NFC, starting with the East. The Dallas Cowboys' pathetic stat. The Cowboys had the exact same amount of wins as they had primetime games. I read on Why Your Team Sucks one year from a Cowboys fan that the Dallas Cowboys are America's team in the worst possible connotation. In reality, the Cowboys are the Buckies of the NFL. They seem fun, but really they're just a giant market full of the worst people imaginable. They haven't made an NFC title game since my younger brother was born, and yet their fans act like they're NFL royalty. They're the Bucks with a better TV deal. This past season, they had 7 primetime games. Let's go through them. Weeks 4 and 13, they squeaked by the Giants twice. The Giants. Week 5, they won by a field goal against a Steelers team that had 226 total yards of offense. Week 8, they lost to the 49ers, whose quarterback, Brock Purdy, had as many rushing yards as the entire Cowboys offense combined. Week 11, they got to see what a real running back looks like. Week 13, they lost after they somehow managed to muff a blocked punt. And Week 16, I'll give you that one. If you're a Cowboys fan who's a ass, feel free to comment below. Bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat, bonus stat. The Cowboys both allowed the most rushing touchdowns in the NFL and had the fewest offensive rushing touchdowns. And they think Javonte Williams is this problem's best remedy? That's cute. The New York Giants' pathetic stat. Drew Lock had more interceptions returned for a touchdown than interceptions that weren't. Daniel Jones, you're mercied out of this stat. You've taken enough heat. Drew Lock wasn't much better in relief, as he had 5 interceptions in 2024, and 3 of them were taken to the house. One of them happened on Thanksgiving against the Cowboys to a player who has the most Cowboys name I've ever heard. The other 2 happened in a 9-minute span against the Falcons to Jesse Bates and Matthew Judon. You know you're turnover prone when the organization that just had you thinks Jameis Winston is a better backup option. The Philadelphia Eagles' pathetic stat, if you can call this that. The Eagles became the first team in NFL history to win the Super Bowl while having 0 regular season interceptions by a cornerback. I know, this isn't as much a pathetic stat as it is absolute insanity. And they drafted 2 corners with their first 2 picks in 2024, and both were awesome. However, every regular season interception was caught by either a safety or a linebacker. And maybe they noticed this too, because in the postseason, they had 4 interceptions by cornerbacks. 2 by Quinyon Mitchell, 1 by Darius Slay, and 1 in the Super Bowl by Cooper DeJean. The Washington Commanders' pathetic stat. The Commanders became the first team in NFL history to allow over 100 points in a 3-game span in a single postseason. As good as the Commanders' offense was, Their defense, as good as the Commanders' offense was, their defense was, well, lacking, especially in the postseason. In their defense, they went up against three of the best offenses in the NFC. They gave up 20 points against the Bucs in the first round, 31 against the Lions in the fifth round, and they got their kicked in by the Eagles in the NFC title game. They gave up 55 points, which led to a final score of 55-23. 55 points, mind you, is the fourth most points ever allowed in a playoff game. They're going to be a great team for a long time, especially with Jaden Daniels at the helm. But they really need to get it together on defense if they want to take that next step towards shoving a Lombardi trophy down Dan Snyder's throat. Moving along to the NFC North, the Chicago Bears' pathetic stat. The Bears had a streak of 9 consecutive losses in which Caleb Williams did not throw a single interception. The Bears, even with their generational talent at quarterback, were inefficient on offense. Their O-line stunk, and their film sessions were nothing but trouble because all they watched was the Super Bowl show. The Bears in 2024 had a 10-game losing streak that began the moment Jaden Daniels completed his Hail Mary to Noah Brown. This began the Bears' 10-game losing streak. The first 9 games of that losing streak, Caleb Williams didn't throw a single pick. It was very nearly 10 games until Caleb Williams threw a pick on the final play of the Mariners' 6-3 defeat over the Cubs. The Detroit Lions' pathetic stat. Aiden Hutchinson, who played 5 games, had exactly as many sacks as the second and third ranked Lions players in that category combined. This is more about how good Aiden Hutchinson is than anything. He was on an absolutely torrid pace until he fractured his leg against the Cowboys. After that, it kind of left the Lions out of options on their defensive line. So they traded for Zadarius Smith, and he was fine, but not nearly as good as Aiden Hutchinson was. And this is also partially due to the fact that the rest of the Lions defense suffered injuries, just everyone got hurt. If Hutchinson can ignore the Twitter rumors of him getting traded, the Lions will go right back to being Super Bowl contenders. The Green Bay Packers' pathetic stat. 20 running backs had equal to or more receptions than the player who led the Packers in targets. The narrative that Jordan Love lacked a true wide receiver one couldn't have been more true. The Packers' offense was fairly meager outside of Tucker Kraft and Josh Jacobs, Jingleheimer Schmidt. Dontavian Wicks had a mere 39 receptions, but he still managed to lead the Packers in targets with 76. 20 running backs had at least as many receptions as him, and the list of running backs that is a list. Rico Dowdle, Javonte Williams, Justice Hill, both Seahawks running backs, and perhaps most wildly, Amir Abdullah. We'll see if Matthew Golden gives Jordan Love that elite weapon that he badly needs. The Minnesota Vikings' pathetic stat. Sam Darnold threw exactly as many interceptions against the Jaguars as every other quarterback in the NFL combined. Remember when I said the Jags struggled to force turnovers? There was one outlier. Former New York Jets quarterback Sam Darnold. He threw 3 interceptions in a game where the Vikings squeaked by the Jags by a final score of 12-7. The only other 3 quarterbacks to throw an interception against the Jags were Jordan Love, Mason Rudolph, and Caleb Williams. In that game, the Vikings maintained possession of the ball for 42 minutes and 19 seconds, which is the most any team had in the NFL this year, which leads me to my next bonus stat. Among non-overtime games, the Vikings had the second highest time of possession in NFL history in a game where they also didn't score a touchdown. The 2011 Browns really came in the clutch here, so shout out to them. The Atlanta Falcons' pathetic stat. Kirk Cousins led the NFL in interceptions despite not starting the final 3 games of the season. Kirko Chains, gonna Kirko Chains. The Falcons paid $180 million over 4 years for a guy who started decently well, but ended the season on a brutal 1-9 touchdown to interception ratio over his final 5 starts. His season ended with an 18-16 touchdown interception ratio, and he ended the season tied with Baker Mayfield for the season lead in interceptions. He was promptly benched for Michael Penix, who will likely be the franchise quarterback moving forward. The Carolina Panthers' pathetic stat. The Panthers allowed the most points in a single season in NFL history, and they were the first team since 1980 to allow over 3,000 rushing yards in a season. The Panthers' defense was abysmal in 2024. They started about as poorly as you could have by allowing 47 points in Week 1 to Derek Carr. And they had only one game all year where they allowed fewer than 20 points. And speaking of the Saints, the New Orleans Saints' pathetic stat. Spencer Rattler is the only quarterback to have more interceptions thrown than his team had points scored in a game. The Saints' offense fell off a cliff as 2024 went on. Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed got hurt. Derek Carr had to retire, which left the Saints with Spencer Rattler and his supporting cast of who gives a shit. The Packers whooped them by a final score of 34-0 in a game where the Packers had more points than the Saints' leading receiver, Foster Moreau, had receiving yards. If the Saints can get healthy again, and if Tyler Shuck can be the quarterback that the Saints coaching staff believes he can be, we won't see stats like this anymore. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers' pathetic stat. Baker Mayfield threw as many interceptions from week 6 to 8 as their defense forced the entire season. Baker Mayfield is the NFL's prototypical gunslinger. He's got the receiver core to do it, but sometimes that inner Cleveland Brown just lurks out from the darkness. From week 6 through 8, he threw 7 interceptions, 3 in week 6 and 2 apiece in weeks 7 and 8. Those games had a combined 207 points. Pure chaos. Their secondary struggled too, especially with injuries, and as a result, they only picked off 7 passes on the entire year. They drafted Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame and Jacob Parrish from Kansas State, so let's see if that does them any favors. The Arizona Cardinals' pathetic stat. 93 players had more or as many sacks as the player who led the Cardinals in sacks. The Cardinals were bad at pressuring the quarterback in 2024, but they upgraded this past offseason. They signed Josh Sweat, they're going to see whatever they can get out of Calais Campbell, and they drafted Walter Nolan, who has an insanely high ceiling. In terms of rushing the passer, they had the second lowest pass rush grade in the NFL in 2024 with a 59.0 PFF grade. Their sack leader, Zaven Collins, had a mere 5 sacks all of last season. Now, in their defense, everyone got a slice of the sack pie, which, wow, that sounds gross. But they didn't have that dynamic pass rusher to put their pass rush over the edge. The LA Rams' pathetic stat. Among playoff teams, the Rams totaled the fewest points in the first quarter since the 2001-2002 season. The Rams didn't start game fast at all last season. They managed to score a mere 30 points in the first quarter all of last season, and the only player on their team with a first quarter touchdown all year was Kyron Williams. I mean, of course they picked it up as games went on, but like, my God. And they started the season 1-4 just to prove that fast starts really aren't their thing. The San Francisco 49ers' pathetic stat. Across all of 2024, the 49ers scored only 14 more points in the second half than they allowed in the fourth quarter. The Super Bowl hangover is a nasty motherfucker. The Niners started off hot in games, but they just couldn't seal the deal. Their defense struggled in 2024, especially in the second half. Their second half point differential was the worst in the NFL at -94, and their fourth quarter point differential at -77 was the worst in the NFL since 2017. It's probably why they let half their defense walk to Denver, but I digress. At least they extended Fred Warner. What's it like to extend a star defensive player? And finally, the Seattle Seahawks' pathetic stat. 6 NFL running backs alone had more rushing yards than every Seahawks running back combined. Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet are a decent duo, But when you have DK Metcalf, JSN, and Tyler Lockett, you might as well rely on your passing game. Seahawks running backs altogether had 1,324 rushing yards in the entire year. And they were single-handedly beaten by the following: Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, and by 5 yards, Josh Jacobs. If both Walker and Charbonnet can stay healthy, there's no reason that number can't jump from last year's small total. With the semi-upgraded offensive line, and after losing Lockett and Metcalf, they may have no choice but to lean on the run more. Were there any stats I missed? Were there any stats that blew your mind? Are you a cute little Cowboys fan who got their feelings hurt? Sound off in the comments below. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more sports content that you didn't ask for.